All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Setting Yourself Up for Success, Organizational Tools and Tips to Break Down Brick Walls. My name is Kathleen McKenzie, Education and Programming Manager here at American Ancestors, and I will be moderating today's session. This program is brought to you by the Brew Family Learning Center. American Ancestors is a nonprofit organization supported by our members and donors. We provide resources and expertise in nearly all aspects of family history, and we're pleased to offer such programming for our members and friends around the world. Our presenter today is Senior Genealogist Rhonda R. McClure. Rhonda is a nationally recognized professional genealogist and lecturer. Before joining American Ancestors in 2006, she ran her own genealogical business for 18 years. She was a contributing editor for Heritage Quest magazine, Biography magazine, and was a contributor to the History Channel magazine and American History magazine. In addition to numerous articles, she is the author of 12 books, including the award-winning Complete Idiot's Guide to Online Genealogy, Finding Your Famous and Infamous Ancestors, and Digitizing Your Family History. She is also the editor of the 6th edition of the Genealogist's Handbook for New England Research. Her areas of expertise include immigration and naturalization, late 19th and early 20th century urban research, New England, the Midwest, Southern, German, Italian, Scottish, Irish, French Canadian, and New Brunswick research. So when researching family history, it can be easy to get swept up in the discoveries that you're making and to forget to stay organized. You may think that you'll remember your initial research goals, the information you found, and the sources that you used, but chances are you'll soon find yourself in a sea of information and unanswered questions, wondering how to proceed. Staying organized is essential for breaking down genealogical brick walls. In this lecture today, Rhonda will share her top tips for staying organized. She'll discuss how to create a research plan, maintain a research log, organize digital files, and more. At any point during today's presentation, please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A panel found at the bottom of your screen. We'll address as many as we can at the end. There's an optional syllabus available for purchase that accompanies today's webinar if you're interested, and your purchase helps support us in making these free webinars. This presentation is also being recorded for later viewing on our website and our YouTube channel. So if you missed something on today's first listen, don't worry, you can always go back and review the presentation later. All right, so without further ado, I'll turn things over to Rhonda.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Organization is probably one of the ugliest words when it comes to genealogy. It is not the fun thing. It is not what we like to do. We like to actually do the research. But I guarantee you that if you do some organizing of what you have and where you're going, you'll get more time to do that research. We are going to focus kind of on 3 areas: organizing your research, organizing all that paper that we have, and then of course, in this digital age, organizing all those computer files. When it comes to organizing all of our research, there are a lot of different tools that we can use to keep ourselves on track, both as to what we've already accomplished and what we want to do the next time we are out at some repository. And we are going to look at research logs, preparing for that future research, and then of course keeping track of all of our families. Now, research logs that are pre-designed typically have many of the fields that you see here: someplace to record your date of research, the repository that you're in, call numbers, because after all, many of us have been doing this back when we used to go to libraries all the time, a description of the source, comments or results, what did you find or not find, then perhaps a column for a document number or some other, notation. And then there are some additional miscellaneous fields that you may find on some of these pre-designed forms. Here we see the one that we have available on American Ancestors, and it is pretty straightforward. You can print it out and handwrite on it. You can type on it through PDF, you know, an Acrobat reader. And one of the things that is very, very important is to always put the repository that you're working at and always make sure that you put the full date for when you went. But you will notice here that there's a variety of different sources listed. There are marriage records, a census, births and deaths, and some tombstone inscriptions that was a published volume. And what you can then see is, in this case, I was at the Family History Library, and so I was using microfilm and books. Then my objective was pretty straightforward for these. It was all about Benjamin Standifer and his family, and then the results are what I did or didn't find. Now, one of the great things about this is that when you're doing something like this, and then perhaps you get additional information, you may want to return to one of these volumes, and it's always helpful to see like what you looked at in that volume before, because now you've got a different slant on things. You will find that particular research log, as well as many of our other research templates at americanancestors.org/downloads. Of course, in today's technology world, a lot of us use our computers a lot, and I admit that I have now taken a kind of word approach to this and created a little table in Word that allows me to do a similar thing with a research log. So you'll see here that I have the ancestors that I'm concentrating on, the objective, the localities I'm focusing on, and then there is a very straightforward, 5-column multi-road approach where I have the date of the search, the location, the descriptions of the source, which is where I tend to put my full source citation to make things a little better for when I am citing it in my computer program, and then my comments. So the purpose of my search, the results, if there was anything odd or strange about the particular resource. And then in my case, I make copies made or digital copies and make a note of that. This particular one was back in 2000, so it was actual paper copies. And then what I would do is I would put all that behind my printed out research log. And then I got home and I would file away those papers. I mentioned some miscellaneous fields that you may find on research logs. Some of those may include what you see here: time period and jurisdiction, surnames. I really do like the condition of source as an as an additional item on a research log. Some are really easy to read. Some have, especially if we're working in microfilm, maybe there's blacked out areas, or maybe the ink is very, very light. So that can affect how reliable you feel that you've been in searching a particular record. And so I like that one. I also like the how source was searched. Did you just like skim through an index at the back of a book, or a grant or grantee index to look for things? So those are a couple of ones that I am toying with adding to and going landscape with my my Word file. And here is a sample of a research calendar / research log that has been around forever that incorporates many of the things we were just talking about. All right, if you are keeping a research log, then you are covering your bases on where have you been in your research. Of course, we usually have questions that come up as we are working in our, adding things to our genealogy database or putting new information on our online tree. And this is where the questions for future research come up. And we're going to look at some ways in which you can keep track of that. One way is through a genealogy program. So if you are using one of the many different genealogy software programs that are out there, They all come with some type of log or task list, or some call it even a research log, but it is designed to give you kind of a, I have to do this the next time I want to work on this family, especially if we're not going to get to whatever that repository is for a while. So here, this happened to be something that I had I was working on at home, and I knew that the next time I got to the library, this was before things were online, I needed to search a number of censuses to look specifically for Lucinda Locke Monroe. Of course, you don't have to do anything fancy. If you have Word or Excel or Access and you're really comfortable with those, you can go ahead and create basically your task list right then and there. This one happens to be done in Excel, again, showing similar entry for looking for research in census records. And of course, it doesn't have to be high tech. If you prefer to work off of a notebook, and I know a lot of genealogists who do, I just suggest having that spiral bound notebook right by you as you're working on either adding information to your forms or however it is that you store the things that you've found. Have that notebook right by and handy so that as a question pops up, you can write it down. Now, I know that when computers came out, we were supposed to be entering the paperless age. I don't know about you, but I feel like I have way more paper now than I ever did before. So we're going to talk a little bit about ways to control that paper. There are all sorts of different schemes out there that allow you to organize your paper. If you take nothing away from this other than what I'm about to say, then I will consider it a win. Whatever system you decide to work with, make sure that you are comfortable with it and make sure that you're going to stick with it. Consistency is crucial to organization. So we're going to look at a few of these types of systems. Now, anytime you're using like a notebook system, so the type of binder that you open and you put stuff in, there are some simple rules that go into that. The biggest one, of course, is you have to control the size of the paper, especially if you're using that 3-ring binder that's 8.5 by 11. That means all of the sheets need to either be 8.5 by 11 or at least be able to fold up to fit in an 8.5 by 11 binder. Separate sheets by surname so that the currently unrelated individuals can also be included. And then within the surname sheets, this system separates the surname by locality. So if I've got a bunch of Smiths in Washington State versus a bunch of Smiths in Illinois, they are all separated out. And then after the locality, each has a page number assigned to it. This particular system is found in William Dollarhide's Managing a Genealogical Project, which was published by Genealogical Publishing Company in Baltimore. He has, it is a 8.5 by 11, very thin book, but he has a lot of the forms that he uses, and then you can make photocopies of those or digitize them and then incorporate your copies, making your notes and whatnot. Surname folder systems kind of take that binder system, which can eat up a lot of shelf space, and kind of flip it, because now you're going to use file folders. And there's a couple of options. One is by document number, consecutive numbering assigned as each new piece of evidence is located and added to that surname folder. The other would be to incorporate Dollarhide's locality and page number system. So again, that you have everybody who is in a specific location of a certain surname together. Now, in the surname and type of record system, this was developed by Sharon Carmack, who wrote Organizing Your Family History. And in her mind and in her way of researching, she feels like she focuses on the surname and then she focuses on the type of record. So for her, that then allows her to keep things organized. And so she uses a note-taking form that includes places for the surname, the type of record, publication information, if it's, a particular book, then the repository and notes from the record. It looks like what you see on the screen right now. It is literally a form that you can photocopy and then fill out by hand. She does not use her computer for taking notes on genealogy because she says we don't just take notes, we tend to transcribe and we take too much information. So she feels like using a note-taking form keeps it to just the facts. And then within each of her folders, she has her table of contents for the files. And you'll see directly below that it says surname and record type. And then it's basically kind of like a research log showing, the enclosure number, the date she did it, the listing, repository, and so on. Another system, and one that I learned out of Brigham Young University's genealogy, family history classes, is known as a family folder system. This also does use a couple of sheets. The research planning sheet provides spaces for specific information about your research problem, includes all the information about the individual being searched and the source being used, and allows the researcher to define the research problem and record the results of the search. It also incorporates a research inventory sheet that is used within each of the family folders, which is kind of like an index to the holdings of that folder, similar to what we were just looking at with Sharon Carmack's table of contents page. It also offers spaces for each document in the folder that reminds the researcher when, where, and what was searched. The surname folder system, family folder system, basically what you do is you take your multi-generational chart, and for every couple on your chart, you create a folder by the name of the husband of that couple. And then everything that goes in there pertains to that family right up until either the wife or the husband get married and make their own family on your multi-generational chart. As I mentioned, it does use a research planning sheet. You don't have to fill this out in great detail. Back when I first started using it, it was very, very helpful, especially when I was new to genealogy, because when I did the definition of problem, it made me focus on exactly what it was I wanted to accomplish. And then you'll see in the lower half, it says information found. I would put the date, especially if I had written away to request a record, and I wouldn't abstract the record. If they sent me a photocopy of a birth certificate, I would just say, see attached birth certificate, and I would slide that certificate right behind the planning sheet. And then this is the research inventory for the folder for Christopher Levi Standifer. And you will see that there is the date of the letter or the search, where I was reaching out to or where I went physically, a summary of what the information or purpose was. If it was something where I had emailed or written to somebody, then I also could record when I received a response, and then they were just numerically added into the folder, with the oldest items being furthest back in the folder. So as each new item is found, I just would put it on top of everything that was already in there. Of course, now we have software that can help us with a lot of what we do. Once again, it doesn't need to be spiffy or fancy or special to genealogy. If you really, really, really love Excel spreadsheets and are very, very capable of doing all the bells and whistles in them, you might want to use that. There's also a number of genealogy database programs, most notably Clues, which is a Windows-only program, but it is considered to be an electronic filing cabinet for all your research. I feel like it came out a little before we truly embraced our computer. And then there are a number of notebook programs, software programs that can be of assistance. Here you'll see a spreadsheet using Excel. And basically this particular item that I've been using for years and years, somebody created the necessary templates for all of the censuses. And it went up to, I believe, 1920. I think that was the most recently released because, of course, the 72-year privacy law holds, we've just now gotten 1950, but that gives you a sense of how long ago I found this. But I use it often, more so if I am concentrating on having to cast a wide net of people who all live in a similar area of the same name, and or I use it most often when I am doing the pre-1850 head of household censuses only. It allows me to condense information into a single screen. I mentioned Clues, that is available at clues.com. And basically, there are a lot of different templates that have been created for Clues that allow you to import your a GEDCOM of the families from your either your online tree and or your genealogy software. But the way in which people are connected through Clues is simply records that they both appear on. And so instead of having to kind of like, shoehorn in somebody that you 100% think is a child of a family, this takes your view and pivots it to look at how people are interacting through the records rather than trying to physically make family units. The other thing that I really love about Clues is the fact that it does force me sometimes to reread something I've had for a while. Here is a land record that I got way back in my, when I was a genealogy baby. And what I discovered was I made a copy of this record because I was told, go out and get the land records. I made the copy, I stuck it in my folder. It happened to be for Benjamin Standifer, so it was his folder. I put it in. And I thought, okay, great. I don't know what it's telling me, but that's great. Clues came out, and because Benjamin was a real brick wall for me, I began to abstract his information into Clues. And one of the things that it did was when I was typing the legal description, which is about halfway down on the screen there, it literally started out the undivided 1/11th part of the northwest quarter. Immediately, because now I have read it because I've now typed it, my brain was like, the undivided 1/11th part. That means that there are probably 10 other documents that allude to this piece of property and could give me a better understanding of the family. However, I will say that now I have sort of, for most of what I do, I have gone the notebook software route. And the notebook software is, again, another general software usually used by people going to college and whatnot, but it really has a great opportunity for us as researchers to keep up with what we're doing. And you'll see here, Microsoft OneNote. It is part of Microsoft 365 if you already have it. Adobe Acrobat I use sometimes, GoodNotes and Notability. Notability is Apple only. Now, Microsoft OneNote literally allows me to put images in and type stuff up and keep track of things. And you'll see at the top that it says Quick Notes. I can add a lot of different tabs. Thinking old school, back when we used to have our 5-subject notebook that we would carry around with us as we went to school. This is the similar premise, only it is now electronic. So I have unlimited pages, I have search capabilities, I have all sorts of functionality right at my fingertips on my computer. GoodNotes is definitely one of my favorite things. I think in large part because I am still a little old school. And so I like the fact that I can uh, handwrite things again as I'm thinking of things. And I can also incorporate images from, say, in this case, this happened to be a Register article, and highlight the parts that I care about. And then off to the margin, I can make my questions or cite sources and things like that. And Notability is a similar program. I actually found it when my daughter had gone back to school for her master's program. And so I thought it would be very helpful for her, but I wanted to try it out before I suggested she get it. I discovered that it is a very powerful program that unfortunately is only for the people who have the Mac products, but if you have an iPad, you can certainly use it. And one thing that you see here is there was a book that somebody brought back to me from Italy that I was dearly wanting. And part of the book included a PDF of 229 pages that detailed a bunch of Italians from that area who had applied for um, passports so that they could leave. And so by loading that PDF onto my iPad, I was able then to take and add notes to the actual pages of those people showing additional research I had found. Of course, again, if you are not in love with computers and technology, spiral bound notebooks can be used just as well. Here we have a page from a research notebook that I created. I had a very condensed project I was working on. I wanted everything to be there with me all the time. And so I just decided to use a spiral bound notebook. And then I did do some cross-referencing of pages. And flowing up the upper half, you will see once again that I have abstracted some records. I have source citations. I have questions on here. And again, one of the things that I like about whether it's a spiral bound notebook or the computer, the like tablet type notebooks, is the fact that I can change colors of ink. I'm a very color centric person. And so things jump out at me differently if I have different colors for different sources, questions, information, etc. Okay, I think the biggest hurdle now for most of us is the organizing of digital files. Like everything else that starts out with organizing, it does require a plan. You do need to identify the scope of what it is you are trying to undertake, because the organizing of your files may differ between your own family research versus maybe a special one name study project or a historical project. And then there is, what do you do with your active research as you're downloading things off of, Family Search, American Ancestors, Ancestry, or going to repositories and getting digital images. So first we're going to look at defining our scope. And as I said, it does sometimes alter how you do things depending on what your primary focus is: family documents, a historical subject, a special project. And if the family related treats images like you would paper copy. So basically you want everything that's in your paper copies to kind of mirror your digital. So if you have elected to do a specific system in your paper copies that, maybe one of the ones we talked about, you want to mirror that on your computer as well. Your special projects or special interests can certainly be done differently. We're going to start off with family search, or family research, I should say. And again, paper files, computer files. Consider adopting that similar system. Again, why? Because it's consistent and you're never going to wonder where you put stuff. Digitize everything that's in your paper files so you always have it. Back up all your digital files, preferably in more than one place, like in a cloud, on a external hard drive, maybe even a couple of clouds. because it's not if, but when your computer decides to eat your data. All right, returning back to the family folders that I showed you earlier that I've been doing since the 1980s, I took this system and applied it to my computer. So here we see the folders. They are arranged last name and then first name of the individual, in large part so that they easily display alphabetically when I'm looking at them. And here I have selected the folder for Christopher Levi Standifer. Now, within his folder, if I have gone off to a repository, you will see that I have a lot of these items that have just the camera's name. The camera gave a name to my particular document. Now, these happen to be the photographs I took of the papers that were in the folder. So in other words, all my paper folders so that I would have them on my computer. And as happens, all of those are now, until I rename them, do carry the file name assigned to it by the camera that took the picture. When I am taking the images, whether by camera, by scanning, or by the new document scanners that kind of look above, I always make my first image the outside of the folder with the person's name on it, in large part because that's going to jump right out at me when I've taken, say, 300 pictures. I'm going to be able to find where my next family folder starts. The one thing that I do automatically do as soon as I have worked a particular family folder, though, is I recreate my electronic inventory so that I can keep that going afterwards as I begin to add my electronic documents. And if you are doing your research logs by family, then you may want to put the individual family files logs in with that family's other items, or you may want to have just one all-encompassing folder that has all of your research logs in it. So combining our paper and digital, many of us have been doing our family history for many, 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 many years. And let's be honest, for a long time, everything had to be photocopied and then we would bring it all home. And now we have all these digital files that are available through the internet. And, we all have smartphones that can take pictures. Again, combine your paper and digital. Take digital photos of your paper files and then put them in an appropriate equivalent computer folder. You want to rename the images of the documents from the paper folder to coincide with your index or inventory sheet, however you're keeping track of things in your paper files. And you don't have to do this all at once. You don't have to sit down and look at mountains of paper and say, I'm never going to get through this. Do it when you're working on a family or you're planning to go on a particular research trip. Take those paper files and digitize them. One way is you're doing these in little piles, but also if you're about to go on a research trip for a particular group of families, now you will have all of that past paper digitized and on your computer. Okay, so I mentioned that, as soon as you start taking pictures on with a camera or a scanner, it already has a predetermined system that it names those so that each new image is a separate file. And so you can see here, they all start with P, and then they have a number. And probably the number, unfortunately, does have something to say with how many pictures I have taken in my lifetime. However, we now have the digital photos. They're ready to be renamed. And now you will see that in the digital folder for, in this case, Guy Standifer, what I have done is I have renamed them based on what they were named in the paper system. And you will notice that there are a couple of digital items that have been subsequently added where the naming is more indicative of the resource, where it came from. And the idea is that between my file name and the information on the document itself, I will always be able to fully cite my source. So if we compare Guy's original inventory sheet where it was all handwritten to the research inventory sheet that I've sort of recreated in Word so that I can save that and continue to add to it, you will see here that everything that was part of the original inventory sheet is there, and it has a document number. Comparing that inventory sheet to the images that I've renamed in his folder, you will see that document 001 page 1 literally coincides with the birth info for Guy Standifer that was document 1 in the original paper folder. And so that's, if it's stuff that's coming from the paper folder, I adhere to the numbering system of that paper folder. If it is something that I am, downloading from an online website, then I give it a lengthier name that corresponds to the resource I was using, again, so that I can always cite my sources based on file name if I, so there's no question. Please, 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 all of your important family history files need to be backed up on the cloud. And I have a couple of clouds. I have iDrive, I have my iCloud because I have a Mac. And so everything just automatically goes up there. And I need this because I had a hard drive, that external hard drive that I used, and I even wrote about this for our Vita Brevis. And all of a sudden it just stopped working, and I panicked because there was a lot of stuff there, and not all of it was up in a cloud or being backed up somewhere. Here we have iDrive, and you will see again that all of the folders that had something in them. So I created on my computer a folder for every couple that I have on my multi-generational chart, my pedigree chart. iDrive only backs up the folders that actually have stuff in it. And so not all of the folders are here yet, but as I digitize more of my things, they will then be added to the backup. And then I also have, as I mentioned, it is on my iCloud because, again, that is built into, because it's saved in my documents, so it automatically goes to the iCloud as well. The difference here is that I get all of my folders because they have been created. So let's talk about if you have a special project that you are very interested in. It could be historical or, a one-name study or something. The first one that I'm going to bring up would be if you are going on a research trip like to Salt Lake City or to National Archives in DC, and somebody you're really friendly with says, "Oh, I really wish you would look this up for me." And we always do because we're nice people. Genealogists are very nice. But you want to treat that research like a special project. Be consistent, keep detailed notes, and keep a copy of what you ultimately give to your friend so that if something happens to her copy or his copy, you can give it to them again. Here you will see this was done on the GoodNotes app. These were notes in preparation for doing some research for a friend of mine while I was at the Public Record Office in Northern Ireland in Belfast back in November of 2022. And so we were looking for some very specific things. And so I did some prep work. And then when I was there, I took all of the various microfilm numbers and things, and as I was working through them, I systematically identified everything that was on those microfilms so that I had a better understanding of what was there. And then I made notes as to the things that I was actually digitizing. And so you'll see that continuing on, I was keeping track of what I ordered because at Proning, I could only order 5 items at a time. I could only have 5 items out. And so as I would return that particular document, after I had returned my 5, I would go and I would order 5 more. And then I also had some suggestions that had been suggested by my friend as things she thought might work. And I, then began to compare those with what I was thinking would be helpful. Ultimately, I took a number of pictures with my digital camera. This one was different. And so all of the images start with a DSC, and then they have their fancy number. What I did was I looked at the numbers and I would then identify all of the items that I took a picture of so that it was very easy for me to then go back and rename those items when it was time to send her the information. I then uploaded the information to a folder and I shared it with her on my OneDrive at work because it was a work project. And then within that particular folder for her, you can see how all of the names to the right are what I gave the name for, ultimately of what I had taken quickly digitally. And so she has all the information needed to know where these records came from, the call numbers and whatnot. And then I also made notes. You can see that I put that I had uploaded those files so that I knew that they were renamed and uploaded. Now, you may be considering doing an article for the Register or for some other genealogical publication. In doing that, you need to assess the scope of your article or articles, then arrange your digital folders for the different types of resources you may be coming in contact with as you are doing the research for the ultimate writing of your article. So you may be working with published volumes, special repositories, there may be genealogies, and then there may be other types of records. Also, one thing to keep in mind is, are you going to need to give somebody else access to all of your files? A perfect example of this would be the 4 articles that were written in the Register, both in the summer and the winter, or summer and fall of the Register for a 4-part series on a couple of families, the Roaches and the Rodmans, a tale of New Bedford Quakerism. The project was always intended to be 4 articles, and as a result, there was a lot of moving parts in this as I was compiling each section. So Quakers in New England was very historical. Part 2 was literally the families done in a register-style descent. Then there were parts 3 and 4 that were more narrative, but we're talking about how what happened in New Bedford at a certain point completely altered the religious tract of these families. And the first thing that I did need to do was I needed to share all the information that I was coming up with and all the documents I was finding with other people. So in this case, I did turn to Dropbox for that. One of the reasons that I liked using Dropbox was the fact that I could create a Dropbox folder on my computer. So it wasn't like I constantly had to go log on to Dropbox. As long as I was connected to the internet, everything I was doing was syncing with that Dropbox because I was literally accessing the files off of Dropbox, even though I was getting them from basically this folder system. Again, always got to track your research. So again, 4 articles. This was a massive project. It was about a 2.5-year project from start to finish. And there were, again, a lot of moving parts. There were things that were going to be, online at various sites. There were things where I was physically going and visiting repositories. And so I wanted to keep all of that, contained and controlled. So one of the things that I did do was I ended up going to Swarthmore and specifically to the Friends Historical Library there to access some collections on the Roaches and Rodmans that they had. So I had the Friends Library at Swarthmore as a tab in my little notebook system on GoodNotes. And then I took the PDF of the inventory of that particular collection and loaded that right in. You will see that I had a corresponding folder for the Swarthmore research that was on Dropbox. And within that particular folder, I then mirrored the folder system of the collection I was working with. So everything that starts 001, that was in box 1 because it was a 2-box collection. And then the folder numbers were in order of the folder numbers in that Hollinger box. So I mirrored the first box and then I mirrored the second one, which was the more important one. It had all of the letters, the family communications. And so you can see here that I have made notes in that PDF that I loaded onto my iPad, and I have corresponded the folders from the finding aid with the actual images I took. Another thing that I did was I spent an inordinate amount of time working in the New Bedford monthly meeting minutes because these people were Quakers. And so I had an entire section devoted to the New Bedford monthly meetings. And I would always include at the very top of each of these pages within my electronic iPad notebook, whether it was men's or women's meetings, the volume of that meeting and the years that were encompassed. And then if I was looking for the complaints and disownments about certain people or whatever it was that I was tracking on the different people who were involved in this whole thing, I made sure to abstract and put the dates and then identify if I had downloaded and saved the image so that, again, I would be able to access it whenever, because unfortunately the Quaker records at the time were only available in through Family Search if you are at a Family Search Center in an LDS church and or at an auxiliary library institution. And then I gave the names of the particular images so that it showed which meeting minutes it was, what volume and what page, because I had the corresponding information in the actual iPad tablet to know who it was that I cared about. So if I was looking at the tablet, I would say, oh, I need men's minutes, for maybe Paul Barney, page 292. I knew exactly what that was. And then there are some times where you end up going to a repository and scanning images from a repository. If that is the case, you want to immediately rename those as you're working. Otherwise, you're going to forget what it is you were doing. Now, historical subjects often are quite different just because of the focus that you are putting. It's on a subject rather than maybe individuals. And anybody who has listened to me in any previous webinar probably knows of my obsession with immigration and naturalization. And one of the things that I try to do whenever I get to Washington, D.C., is I spend at least a day going through what are known as Entry 9 case files of individuals who had some issue when they tried to enter the country. And I get the pictures of that so that I can go through it and learn more about what may have stopped somebody from coming, or, what kind of bonds were used and those types of things, so that, again, when I give lectures, I am more informed. Let's talk about active research now. Active research does not necessarily mean that I have physically gotten on a plane and gone somewhere. It's the research you do online from home. It's the research trip you take maybe to the Family Search Library in Salt Lake City. It is the research trip you take to, your local public library, an archive, or some other repository. Now, online research from home, this is where we tend to be a little lazy. We download the images. The problem is we forget that all of those online websites have their default naming of the images. So you want to rename your file immediately as soon as it has been downloaded, and then move it to your appropriate folder on your computer. Make note of it in the research log or folder inventory for that folder, that family, however you have that going. Don't download lots of images and then go back and try to rename them. Number one, it's boring and we don't like that, but it may be harder because you may have done a lot of downloading and you'll forget where you got everything. Also, rely on info of online sites for source citations to better help you with some of that information. Another reason why you should rename it immediately. Okay, so here is a digital folder of William James Eyre. And once again, I have the research inventory sheet. Again, even though all of his stuff is digital, I am just comfortable with this kind of form. So he gets one as well. And you will see that I have an 1881 census for William Eyre. It is microfilm roll C13185, the collection, and then it's roll 181. That is supplied to me by the people who digitize this information. I include it as a way of identifying what it is, and sometimes helps me to be able to quickly find things. So you can see each one of these has a specific name to it, and I have corresponded that. And again, you'll see that I also am using colors in the inventory sheet for different things. Black is the actual source, and then the colors are what did I find, what's the file name I gave it, and so on. Researching at the Family Search Library in Salt Lake City and or going to a Family Search Center in an LDS church, accessing digital images that are not available at home. These are the ones that you have to physically go to access. They also have computers with microfilm scanners, they have book scanners, and they now have this thing called memory lane where you can digitize negatives and all sorts of older style, collections of things that we have. Here is the memory lane, and basically every type of scanner you could imagine, they have it. It's hooked up to a computer. But remember that all of those are going to give names based on the computer software that's being used. It's going to have, in often cases, a default version. Few things to keep in mind: what you are digitizing. Now, keep in mind that as you're digitizing, the scanners save that to some default folder system on the actual computer itself. And traditionally, those get wiped at the end of the day. So if you don't save it off of that computer, it's gone. So you want to make sure you copy whatever you have scanned and you put it onto a thumb drive. And once you have the thumb drive, then as you're loading it onto your computer, you can name the files as you are moving them to their appropriate places. Keeping in mind, as I said, that the computer is going to give us a default numbering system. Now, sometimes you can alter that. It will, depending on how the scanning software has been set up, you may be able to name things as you go. If that's the case, again, name them like, if it's a will, put Suffolk County Probate Will Book blah blah page, whatever, or Suffolk County Probate case file, and then the number of the probate packet. Archives and repositories, what are the digital options? So before you even go, make sure that you know what you're allowed to do and not do. Is a digital camera allowed? Do they have scanners on site? Can you bring in, they've got these new nifty document scanners that sit on the table and kind of take a view from above, and you just have to keep flipping the pages and hitting a button on your computer. Those are amazing. How long is your trip going to be? And then what are you taking? These are things to keep in mind. Also, you've got to have goals and a research plan before you go. There is nothing worse than, spending an overnight red-eye trip to Belfast, Ireland, and getting there and then having no clue as to what you're going to do. So have your goals and your research plan. Name your files so you can identify them when you return home. Now, this happens to be a sample from a trip to Washington, D.C., where we were going to DAR, Library of Congress, as well as the National Archives. And so basically what I did was, at the moment, everything was just being slotted off of the digitized records into a folder that I would then mine through once I got home, so that it was easier for me to make sure I had everything, make sure everything looked good, but I could worry about putting it where it needed to be once I got home. And within the NARA folder, I had basically a 195-page pension application for Benjamin Standifer that I, took camera pictures of. And then I went back to spending way too much time in my record group 85 immigration and naturalization files. Those I arrange by the record group case file number, because that is how they are accessed through NARA, and then I have a finding aid to that. So within, you will see here that I do have under record group entry 7, that's another set, but you'll see the file, and it says file, and then it has a number. That was the number of as assigned by NARA to that particular record, or by the Immigration and Naturalization Service. And then sometimes if I have like a miscellaneous picture I've taken for use of, this is what files look like, that may just have a random camera number. But as you can see here, the file number of 38070 came out of the Hollinger box image, and then I took that number for the, because that's the number of the file in question. So keep in mind, different projects may need different digital structure. Keep research logs and folder inventories of some sort. You've got to keep track of what you're doing and where you're going and what you've got. Digitize your paper files as you work on your families, and then move thumb drive files to your computer nightly if you're traveling. Like when you get back to the hotel, just move them off onto your computer so that maybe, as you're connected and maybe surfing the web to plan for the next day, they're getting backed up into your cloud.
All right. Thank you so much, Rhonda, for that fantastic webinar. So much information covered there. We have been getting a lot of great questions in. We'll get to those in just a moment. But first, I just wanted to highlight some upcoming events that we have. So first, I wanted to highlight that in September, we're going to have a 5-session online course. And this will tie in with the theme of today's webinar. So it's a great option if you want to kind of delve into this topic a bit deeper. It's called Expert Strategies for Breaking Down Brick Walls, and Rhonda is one of the presenters for that, along with David Allen Lambert and Melanie McComb. Then I also wanted to highlight our November Salt Lake City research tour, since Rhonda was kind of mentioning the Family Search Library in today's webinar. This research tour allows participants to spend a week researching at the Family Search Library in Salt Lake City with our experts. Again, Rhonda is one of the genealogists who leads that tour, as well as David Allen Lambert and Melanie McComb. And participants receive a consultation before the tour to prepare, 2 consultations at the library, lectures, group meals, and more. And then finally, coming up in just a few days on August 19th, we have an online author talk for the book The History of America's Bookshops with author Evan Friss and a panel of bookstore owners as well. So that should be interesting and definitely worth checking out. You can learn more about these and other upcoming events at americanancestors.org/events. All right, so now we will get into your questions. I know we're in a little bit of overtime here, but we want to definitely get to the great questions you've been submitting. So first, Rhonda, we had a lot of questions along this line. Somebody asked, you've mentioned that you use couples as the folder unit, but when do you break out the children, especially if you have a lot of information on the children and the children are, kind of having families of their own? When do you kind of separate those children out of that folder?
So the system that I use relies on literally the pedigree chart. So me, obviously I have a folder with my husband, and then, my parents are in my dad's folder because they're all arranged by the men's name. It- it's a men's world. We women are just in it. But what I do, and because it's arranged that way, only the direct lineage person gets their own folder. Uh, and usually my defining moment is as soon as the next generation couple marries, that's where all of their records are now going to go into their new folder. The kids that I'm not bringing forward, even if I'm gathering information about them, that's still going to be in dad's folder. And this is why I said that if you're doing certain types of family research, you may have to pivot or adjust accordingly. So if you are actually, working on the descendants of so and so, and you're researching all of those, every child needs to have their own folder as soon as they get married and they're, creating records of their own, so that when you go to compile that book or whatever it is you're going to do, you have all of that right at your fingertips. So hopefully that explains if you're focusing just on the direct line, it's only the direct person who gets their own folder next. If you are doing some kind of massive descendants of somebody, then as soon as everybody marries in whatever generation, they're going to get their own folder.
Okay, got it. Very helpful. Thank you. And then we got a lot of questions about how you handle records that deal with multiple people. So, for example, a photo that has several family members, a census record that might list several family members. How do you deal with kind of labeling those? And do you ever have duplicates of those documents in multiple folders? How do you kind of handle that?
So back in the paper days, I would literally use that research planning sheet and I would say, go to so-and-so's folder for the original. Now, with things being digitized, I just create a copy of it and put it into whoever's folder it's appropriate for. The difference is that when I'm citing a census record anyway, it is based on the head of the household. That's how I identify the record. And so, you know, if my person is a married adult, but he's not the head of the household, then the document is still going to have the name of his dad, kind of thing, or the mom, depending on who's the head of the household at this point. So the naming is going to be about the record, and then I will put it in whoever folder needs it to be available whenever I'm working on somebody.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And then we got a few questions. So you showed some examples of software that you use, kind of note-taking software and things like that, where you had writing shown, like handwriting rather than typing. And some folks were wondering, were you using something like an Apple Pencil to do that, or were you kind of scanning writing in? Is there an option to type instead of handwriting? Just some questions about that.
Yes. So because I have my iPad, I do have an Apple Pencil, and I use that. It has a little slot on the holder that holds my iPad. However, if I access that particular uh, Good Notes or Notability on my computer, which I can do because that's one of the reasons I use it. I can do it on my phone, I can do it on the iPad, or I can do it on the computer. If I'm on the computer, then whatever I'm putting in will be typed. If you are using one of the like Windows versions, like even the Microsoft OneNote, if I'm again on the computer, it's going to be typed information. However, if your computer doubles as a tablet, a touch screen and whatnot, and you have a stylus, you can also avail yourself of handwriting and highlighting and all of that within OneNote.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Um, then some questions about kind of naming files to do with women who would have maybe changed their name after they got married, or people who have kind of alternate spellings of names and things like that. How do you deal with that when naming files and folders?
So I will be blunt. I name it whatever the name of the person is on the document. It's where they go in the folder that's the important part. So if I have, I'll take Sarah Sycophus because she's got a unique name. As when I found her birth, that is filed under her dad as, Sarah Sycophus birth at 1879 or whatever it was, and where I got it from. However, then she gets married to Christopher Levi Standifer, and now she's gonna, her death record's gonna go in here. Now it's going to be Sarah Standifer, death, whatever the date is. The purpose is that with the system that I do, I always know once they're married and in a like and are having their family, because it's that direct line, I automatically know that anything after her marriage is going to be in his folder, and anything before her marriage is going to be in dad's folder. And so whatever her name is on the record is less important. It's where I put it that makes it easy to find. And then because I'm naming it what it is on the record, I can properly cite that document.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Then a question here that says, can you speak a bit more about numbering the pieces of information in the order that they're found, and how do you maintain that numbering? Is it per surname or per family folder?
So the numbering for the system that I personally use is per family folder. And so as soon as I, start working on a family and I get a document, that becomes document number one. Whether or not it's the most reliable document remains to be seen, but it is something that I have and I'm basing my current research on. It automatically would become document number one if I was doing the paper system. And since I started doing this back in the 80s, I got a lot of papers. And so everybody's got, like, each family folder has documents number one to whatever, depending on how difficult they were to research. And then I have just mirrored that into the digital one. Meanwhile, as I'm doing digital documents now, those I'm naming more creatively because number one, I'm no longer limited to the very old DOS days of 8.3. And so I can put a more detailed description of a file in, as to the file name. And then again, it just falls in the next line of my inventory sheet.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much. Then we also got a few questions asking if you'd recommend just kind of using a family search tree or an ancestry tree to kind of manage all of your documents and all of that. Is that something you'd recommend?
I mean, if you're comfortable doing it, yes, you can certainly do that. I, I mean, I came at this really old school long before we had any of that, and so my mind is very separated from those online trees. Do they give you hints and things? Absolutely. Are they a great resource? They can be, as long as you pay close attention to what the hints are. Don't, record somebody who's already dead as living in the 1950 census. But um, I like having all of that so that, if heaven forbid ancestry disappears tomorrow, I would be very, very sad because now I wouldn't be able to search their stuff, but all my stuff is with me. And so, again, it's almost a kind of a backup thing where you want to have something besides just that one place.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. That makes sense. Um, then I think we'll close with just one more question. Someone was wondering if you would mind sharing your colored pen system, if you'd like to.
So the colors are, I mean, I have no real system other than uh, black is always whatever, like if I'm doing something on like maybe a pre-printed form that I've loaded onto my iPad, the black is what I have been supplied with. And then there is usually very little as far as like a specific color for things because unfortunately as a professional I run the gambit of what I do. And so it's more about when I'm working on a particular project being consistent that all so yeah, all vital records would be maybe in blue, and all census comments would be, like census stuff would be in maybe pink, immigration in red, those types of things. So it's within whatever it is that I'm working on, that is where I adhere to the certain colors so that I can say, oh, yes, here is, an immigration record, but I have questions about it. So then I have, like, I usually use hot pink for my questions because that just jumps right out at me and says, oh, yeah, we got to answer that kind of situation. So if you have colors that mean things to you, then you could certainly, adhere to that. And like I said, most of these online notebook systems have many, many colors already like in them that default, and then you can always go out and create your own. And so I also do certain highlighting with different colors as well. So if there's like something where I know I really have to pay attention to it, that's yellow always. That's something where I've got a question and I got to deal with it. Then if there is something where there is maybe a discrepancy between two records, I may highlight that in like a teal so that again, it jumps out at me as something that is something's wrong and I need to work with it. Whereas the yellow is like a critical thing that has to be solved.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Rhonda, again for that wonderful presentation today. Definitely a mammoth topic to tackle. And thank you all for your wonderful questions that you sent in. Unfortunately, that is all that we have time for today for questions. But if you do have more specific questions about your family history research, you might consider hiring our research services team or using our chat service as well. The chat service is totally free and it puts you in direct communication with a genealogist. It's available Monday through Saturday from 9 to 5 Eastern Time. And to access that service, you simply go to americanancestors.org/chat. And again, totally free. I really recommend checking that out. You can also book a one-on-one consultation with our experts at the link shown on the screen or through the QR code displayed here as well. And I'll mention Rhonda is one of our genealogists who gives a lot of the consultations, so you could even book one with her if you'd like as well. So thank you again for joining us, and you will have an opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback on today's webinar. As we continue to expand our webinars and online offerings, any feedback is very helpful and appreciated. This free webinar was made possible by the generous support of our members and friends around the world. Please consider making a gift to American Ancestors to help keep these programs free and to create more. If you'd like to access more how-to resources or learn about upcoming online educational programs, please visit our online learning center at americanancestors.org/education. Thank you all again, and I hope to see you at our online programs in the future. Goodbye for now.